Within the palace, where every stone bears the imprint of the king's past, there is a woman quietly reweaving the order of things, not through public power, but through invisible threads of persuasion, loyalty, and blood ties. Camilla does not merely wish to be queen consort. She desires something far deeper, a permanent place for her family within the ancient structure of royal power. Not just the woman who entered the monarchy for love, but the one who opens a path for her own bloodline to take root in a realm once reserved for blue-blooded legacy. And William, raised between duty and loss, begins to sense that something is shifting. Not loudly, not clearly, but powerfully enough that he can no longer remain still. Out of loyalty to the crown and the burden of being heir, he is forced to choose between silence and action, especially as Camilla's shadow grows more present in the sacred corners of the monarchy. What is truly unfolding behind these ancient walls, and how will William respond when the line between family and sovereign begins to blur? Stay with the story, where every word is a calculated move on a silent chessboard. Buckingham Palace's Grand Hall glowed with a radiant light, as if centuries of history shone through the crystal chandeliers suspended above. The sparkling prisms reflected golden hues, illuminating walls adorned with portraits of kings and queens from ages past. The lilting strains of a violin from a small orchestra in the corner mingled with the hushed murmurs of aristocratic guests exchanging discreet tales of politics, legacy, and the hidden secrets of the court. This was a private royal gathering, a rare occasion where royals and influential figures mingled free from the glare of cameras or the scrutiny of the press. At the heart of the room stood Queen Camilla, her regal bearing accentuated by a deep green silk gown that hugged her frame, highlighting a confidence honed over years. Her hair was neatly pinned, her gaze sharp, yet softened by a polite smile. Beside her, inseparable as ever, were her son Tom Parker Bowles and her sister Annabel Elliot. Tom, with his easy smile and natural charm, was recounting a humorous anecdote that drew laughter from a cluster of guests. Annabel, elegant in a cream-colored dress, tilted her head gracefully to acknowledge a greeting from an earl. They bore no royal blood yet. Today they occupied seats of honor, clinking glasses with England's noblest lineage, as if they were born to belong here. Prince William stood not far off near an ancient portrait of Queen Victoria. Dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, he held a glass of wine firmly but untouched. His piercing blue eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail with the alertness of someone perpetually on guard. When his gaze settled on Tom, whose story had just elicited another round of laughter, a flicker of irritation stirred within him. "They're not royalty," he thought, his fingers tightening slightly around the glass. "They're the Queen's family, but that doesn't give them the right to sit in those seats laughing as if they're part of this legacy." William was not one to wear his emotions openly. From a young age, he had learned to conceal his true thoughts, knowing that every action, every glance could be dissected by the public and the press. But inside, a quiet storm was brewing. He disliked how effortlessly Tom and Annabel blended into this space, as if they'd forgotten the line between the Queen's family and the royal bloodline. He told himself, "As long as they don't cross into public affairs, I'll let it be. But if they meddle in matters of state..." The thought was cut short as an elderly duke with silver hair approached to shake his hand. William flashed a perfected smile, honed over years, but his eyes remained icy. From across the room, Camilla caught William's gaze. She recognized that look, the silent scrutiny of an heir, quietly assessing his surroundings. She'd seen it before, but she betrayed no hint of unease. Instead, she raised her wine glass to her lips, took a small sip, and continued her conversation with the Duchess, recounting a hunting trip in Scotland. Her smile never wavered, but in her mind, she was painting a grander picture, a long-term plan where her family would not merely be guests in the palace, but wielders of influence power in a secure place within the royal system. William turned away, stepping toward a large window overlooking the darkened garden. The light from the hall couldn't pierce the night outside, and in that moment he felt a strange solitude. He knew he stood at a crossroads of royal history, where every decision he made would shape not just the present, but the future of the throne. He didn't want to confront Camilla, didn't want to hurt his father, but his instincts warned him that these strangers in the banquet hall were quietly changing the rules of the game. In the days following the banquet at Buckingham Palace, The palace settled back into its usual rhythm, or at least the outward appearance of calm. The long corridors lined with red carpets were meticulously cleaned, and the ancient portraits gazed down silently, witnesses to secrets never spoken. But behind the heavy oak doors, a subtle game of power was unfolding, with Queen Camilla holding the pieces. Camilla knew her place in the royal family was never guaranteed. Though she was queen, she still felt the wary glances of other courtiers, the whispers about her past, and her title as the second wife. But Camilla was not one to let such murmurs deter her. She had learned to turn disadvantages into strengths, and now she was building a stronger foundation, not just for herself, but for her own family. In a small room at Clarence's house, Camilla sat at a desk, the glow of an antique lamp illuminating a stack of documents before her. Her son, Tom Parker Bowles, stood near the window holding a coffee cup, his gaze drifting absently over the garden. "Mother, are you sure this won't stir up trouble?" Tom asked, his voice low, tinged with unease. "The royal family isn't exactly a playground for experiments." Camilla looked up, her smile gentle but razor sharp. "Tom, do you think I act without calculation?" She replied, her tone even, but brimming with confidence. "The royals need people like you, people who understand how the modern world works. Media events, heritage projects, who's better suited than you to take them on?" Tom nodded, but a flicker of doubt lingered in his chest. He knew he didn't belong in this world, with no royal blood in his veins. Yet his mother, with her cunning and determination, had convinced him he could and must play a bigger role. Camilla had begun her moves months earlier. With small, almost invisible steps, she maneuvered Tom and her sister Annabel Elliot into positions of influence within the royal system. Tom, under the title of culinary and media expert, was invited to join a heritage restoration project at an ancient estate in Wiltshire. He organized events, courted the press, and crafted articles celebrating royal history, all executed with a polished exterior, but granting him access to key relationships. Annabel, with her background in interior design, was tasked with managing several small but historically significant estates like an old manor in Gloucestershire. These roles were not prominent enough to draw attention, but they carried enough weight to wield subtle power, the kind of power Camilla knew how to value. In a private meeting with King Charles, Camilla laid out her plan with her trademark finesse. She sat across from him in his Buckingham Palace study, the firelight casting shadows across her face. "Charles, you know the monarchy needs to modernize," she said, her voice soft but persuasive. "Tom has media experience. He can help us reach younger audiences. And Annabelle has managed major projects. She can ensure the estates are maintained without costly outsourcing. These are people we trust, Charles. Loyal and reliable." Charles, with his silver hair and weary eyes, rubbed his temple lightly. He was no longer the vigorous man he once was. Illness and the relentless pressures of his role had drained him. He looked at Camilla, the woman who had stood by him through countless storms, and saw the logic in her words. "If you think it's fine, go ahead," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I trust you." Camilla smiled a smile, both tender and discreet. She knew Charles wouldn't object. He lacked the strength to challenge her, and she had learned to use his weariness to solidify her position. But she also knew not everyone in the palace would be as acquiescent as Charles. Meanwhile, at Kensington Palace, William was immersed in his charitable projects and the duties of an heir. He didn't attend Camilla's meetings, but whispers about Tom and Annabel began to reach him. During a briefing, a trusted aide casually mentioned Tom's invitation to advise on a major royal event. "Sir, he seems quite active," the aide said cautiously. William paused, his pen hovering midair. "Active how?" he asked, his voice calm, but his eyes sharp. "He's involved in several projects, sir. And Miss Annabel, too. They seem to have the Queen's full confidence." William didn't respond immediately. He set his pen down, gazing out the window where the pale afternoon light bathed the garden. A sense of unease stirred within him like a cold breeze slipping through a crack. He had no concrete evidence yet, no solid reason to act, but his instincts, honed by years of navigating challenges, warned him something was amiss. "Keep an eye on it," he told the aide, his voice low but commanding. "And report back if anything unusual comes up." That night in his private quarters, William stood before a mirror, loosening his tie. He looked into his own eyes, wondering if he was being overly sensitive. Camilla was his stepmother, the woman his father loved. But the strangers in the banquet hall, the confident smiles of Tom and Annabelle lingered in his mind. He didn't want to doubt, but he knew the court a place where loyalty could mask ambition and trust could lead to betrayal. One late afternoon at Kensington Palace, the soft golden light of London filtered through tall glass windows illuminating a polished walnut desk. Prince William sat there, a thick stack of documents before him, routine financial reports from the royal estates. This was a task he always made time for, not out of obligation, but because he believed the duty of an heir extended beyond grand ceremonies to the dry numbers that told the story of stability of the legacy he would inherit. William flipped through the pages, his sharp blue eyes scanning the rows of figures. He was accustomed to this, to spotting small discrepancies that could signal larger issues. But today, as he reviewed a report from an ancient estate in Cornwall, a place of childhood memories with its lush gardens and weathered stone walls, he froze. An unusual expense had spiked, doubling from the previous year, vaguely labeled as consulting and maintenance fees. The beneficiary was a small company called Elliott Heritage Solutions, and a quick check through the internal system revealed it was run by a close friend of Annabelle Elliott. Even more telling, the records showed Tom Parker Bowles had introduced the company to the royal system. William's grip tightened, a cold wave of suspicion washing over him. This can't be a coincidence, he thought, his heart beating faster. The numbers seemed to confirm the unease he'd been suppressing. This wasn't a random error. It reeked of manipulation of hands, not born to royalty, reaching into the throne's coffers. He stood pacing to the window, gazing out at the garden, now sinking into dusk. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, but his mind was in turmoil. William wasn't one to anger easily. He had learned to control his emotions since losing his mother, enduring years under the press's relentless flash. But now a quiet fury burned within him, anger at the exploitation, at the possibility his father was being blinded, and at himself for not seeing it sooner. If this is the tip of the iceberg, he told himself, I need to dig deeper. Without hesitation, he summoned his most trusted aide, James, a middle-aged man with a perpetually calm demeanor who had served him for over a decade. James entered, holding a notebook, his voice deferential. Sir, is something the matter? William turned, his voice steady but resolute. James, runs need a full audit. Every contract, expense, and transaction linked to Queen Camilla, Tom Parker, Bowles, Annabelle Elliott, and any company tied to them over the past 18 months. Leave nothing out. I want everything clear and transparent. James raised an eyebrow, a flicker of concern in his eyes. Sir, this could stir up a storm. It involves the Queen and her family? William locked eyes with him, his voice low but commanding. I know. But if there's a storm, let it come. The monarchy can't stand on a foundation of secrets and exploitation. I need the truth, James, and I need it fast. James nodded, offering no further argument. I'll start immediately, sir. It'll take a few weeks to gather everything. As James left, William sat back down, rubbing his temple. He felt a weight on his shoulders, but also a renewed sense of purpose. He didn't want to confront Camilla directly, not yet, but he knew that if his suspicions were true, he couldn't stay silent. This wasn't just about finances. It was about the honor of the monarchy, the legacy he and future generations would protect. 3 weeks after William ordered the audit, the air in his private office at Kensington Palace felt heavier than ever. The glow of an antique desk lamp illuminated a thick stack of documents freshly delivered by James. This is the full report, Sir James said, his voice low and cautious, as if aware these pages could shake the palace to its core. We've reviewed everything as you requested. William nodded, not looking up. Thank you, James. Leave me to it. And keep this quiet for now. James bowed and exited, leaving William with a silence broken only by the ticking of an old clock on the wall. He opened the first page, his sharp blue eyes scanning the meticulously arranged numbers and notes. But as he delved deeper, his heart tightened. The report, spanning over 50 pages, detailed every expense, contract, and connection with chilling precision. It not only confirmed his initial suspicions, but revealed a system of staggering complexity and cunning. The report disclosed that Tom Parker Bowles, Camilla's son, was linked to at least 3 projects using public royal resources. An event planning project in Wiltshire had paid Tom an unusually high media consulting fee, despite scant evidence of tangible work. Another project tied to promoting royal heritage on media platforms funneled money through a shell company connected to Tom's friends. But what chilled William was the third item, a maintenance contract for the Cornwall estate, where a substantial sum was paid to Elliott Heritage Solutions, the same company he'd flagged earlier. Annabel Elliott, Camilla's sister, was equally implicated. The report revealed she enjoyed privileged access to a small estate in Gloucestershire, unlisted among public royal assets. She hosted private events there, from intimate gatherings to investor meetings, all under the guise of heritage preservation. Yet no financial reports accounted for the income from these events, and parts of the estate were used for her personal gain. Worse still, the report uncovered a series of semi-transparent financial transactions deals disguised as legitimate contracts, but channeled through shell companies all tied to Camilla's trusted allies. These firms, with innocuous names like Heritage Partners or Cultural Trust Lewantide, seemed designed solely to siphon royal funds into the hands of Camilla's circle. Each transaction was cloaked just enough to evade routine audits, but not enough to escape the thorough scrutiny William had demanded. William sat silently, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk, each tap echoing the anger smoldering within. These weren't the innocent favors Camilla had claimed in meetings with Charles. This was a web, a meticulously woven network exploiting her position as queen for personal gain. He felt a deep betrayal, not just to the monarchy, but to his father, who had trusted Camilla and allowed her free reign. He stood moving to the fireplace, where flames crackled softly. Staring into the dancing sparks, William recalled childhood days running through royal estates with Harry, when life seemed simpler. But now, as the heir, his duty was to protect not just the legacy, but the honor of the throne. "She thought I'd let this slide," he whispered to himself, his voice low, but resolute. At Clarence's house, Camilla was dining with Annabel, the two sisters chatting cheerfully about new projects and opportunities. Camilla smiled, pleased with how things were progressing. She had no idea that across London, William held evidence that could unravel her entire plan. In his private office at Kensington Palace, William sat silently, his gaze fixed on the financial report pages, exposing Camilla's intricate web. He gripped the folder tightly, his knuckles whitening. After sleepless nights weighing every option, he reached an unyielding decision. He had to report this to his father, King Charles. In William's heart, a fierce belief burned that Charles, despite his fatigue and affection for Camilla, was still a king with pride and duty. He was certain that when faced with the truth, his father would punish Camilla and her allies for exploiting the royal name. With the report in hand, he left his office, carrying both his conviction and the burden of an heir. At Buckingham Palace, Charles's study exuded an air of timeless grandeur. Polished oak walls reflected the glow of the fireplace, and ancestral portraits loomed above as silent witnesses. Charles sat behind his desk, his frail hands flipping through a letter, his eyes betraying exhaustion. When William entered, he looked up, a faint smile crossing his face, quickly fading as he saw his son's stern expression. "William," Charles said, his voice hoarse but warm, "is something important bringing you here?" William stood tall, placing the report on the desk, his voice calm but resolute. "Father, I need you to look at this. There are irregular expenses, shady contracts, all tied to Camilla's family, Tom, Annabel, and her trusted associates." Charles glanced at the report, his eyes flickering with unease. He rubbed his temple, a familiar gesture when facing difficult matters. "William, are you certain?" he asked, his voice softening as if trying to sidestep the issue. "You're talking about the Queen, her family. This is a serious matter." William felt a surge of anger, but restrained it, keeping his tone steady and sharp. "I'm certain, Father. These aren't random errors. Tom is tied to 3 projects using public funds with opaque payments. Annabel has used the Gloucestershire estate for personal gain unreported. And there are shell companies funneling royal money to Camilla's allies. This is a system built to abuse power." Charles flipped through a few pages, but his gaze lacked focus. He paused, looking up at his son, and in that moment William saw a mix of unease and pain in his father's eyes. "Camilla? She just wants to help," Charles said, his voice fading as if convincing himself. "She says Tom and Annabel have expertise, that they can save costs and avoid risk from outsiders." Charles's words struck William like a blade, piercing his faith. He had hoped his father would react decisively, defending the monarchy's honor, but instead he was defending Camilla. William clenched his fist, struggling to stay calm. "Father, this isn't helping," he said, his voice low but cutting. "This is exploitation. Camilla has built a network to place her family in positions of influence to siphon royal funds. If we don't act, the public will find out, and they won't forgive us." Charles sat in silence, his trembling hand setting the report down. He stared into the fireplace as if seeking answers in the flickering flames. After a long pause, he spoke, his voice almost a whisper. "Their family, William. This could be handled more gently." Those words stung William's heart. He looked at his father, seeing the exhaustion and hesitation in his eyes. Charles wasn't irresponsible, but illness and love for Camilla had clouded his judgment. William stepped forward, his voice low but commanding. "If you can't handle this, I will. Because this is no longer about family. This is about the honor of the throne." Charles looked up, his eyes meeting his son's. In that moment, he saw a different William, not the boy who once held his hand during hunting trips, but a man ready to defend the crown even against his own family. Charles felt his son's resolve, but also a deep pain, the pain of a father caught between love and duty. William didn't wait for a reply. He gave a slight bow, a final gesture of respect, and turned to leave. The heavy oak door closed behind him, leaving Charles alone with the report and his tangled thoughts. He knew William wouldn't stop, and whether he wanted it or not, the palace was on the brink of a storm. At Clarence's house, Camilla sat in the drawing room, holding a glass of red wine, her eyes glinting in the firelight. A trusted confidant had just relayed the conversation between William and Charles, and she couldn't suppress a triumphant smile. Charles had chosen to defend her, as she always knew he would. "Family," she murmured, sipping her wine, a sense of victory spreading through her. She thought of William, the young heir, with his piercing gaze, and felt a renewed confidence. "He may suspect, but he can't touch me," she told herself. With Charles's support, Camilla felt emboldened to expand her influence, further placing Tom and Annabel deeper into the royal system. She raised her glass as if toasting her own plan, unaware that William across London was preparing for a battle she hadn't anticipated. After his confrontation with King Charles, William returned to Kensington Palace with a resolve stronger than ever. The conversation with his father had disappointed him, but it also ignited a new fire within an heir's determination to protect the monarchy's honor. Charles, swayed by his affection for Camilla, had chosen to avoid the truth. But William couldn't wait, couldn't allow Camilla's web to spread further into the royal system. He knew that to safeguard the throne, he had to act not with fanfare, but with the precision of a future king. One misty London morning, William summoned his closest advisors to a meeting room at Kensington. The small space with its antique wallpaper and long oak table felt heavy with anticipation. James, his loyal aide, stood in the corner, clutching a fresh set of documents, his expression guarded but anxious. The other advisors, financial experts, lawyers, and estate managers, sat around the table awaiting the heir's words. William stood, his demeanor calm but radiating natural authority. He rested his hands on the table, his gaze sweeping over each person. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady and clear. "Today I announce a comprehensive audit of all royal assets and finances. I will personally oversee this effort to ensure every expense, contract, and operation is transparent and serves the Crown's interests." No names were mentioned in William's statement, but the room understood the true target. From whispered court gossip and James's discreet reports, they knew the audit's focus was Queen Camilla and her network, Tom Parker Bowles, Annabel Elliot, and the shell companies draining royal resources. An older advisor with silver hair and sharp eyes nodded slightly, approving William's decisiveness. But a younger lawyer furrowed his brow, wary of the turmoil this could unleash. William continued, his voice unwavering. "The monarchy is more than a family. It's a symbol of trust, of responsibility to the public. We cannot let any doubt tarnish that honor." He paused, his eyes scanning the room, ensuring his message sank in. "The audit begins immediately. I expect full cooperation from all of you." As the meeting ended, news of William's announcement spread like wildfire through the court. The long corridors of Buckingham and Clarence's house buzzed with whispers. "The prince is sending a message," a veteran staffer murmured to a colleague in a quiet hallway. "This isn't just an audit. It's a warning to the Queen." Another nodded. "William doesn't make noise, but when he moves, no one can stop him." At Clarence's house, Camilla received the news at noon, while taking tea with Annabelle. A pale-faced aide rushed in delivering a copy of the announcement. Camilla set her delicate porcelain teacup down her hands, trembling slightly, though her face remained composed. "He dares!" she whispered, her eyes flashing with a mix of anger and surprise. She had underestimated William, believing he'd be restrained by Charles's affection or the unwritten rules of the court. But this announcement, brief, cold, and authoritative, was a declaration of war without raising his voice. A chill ran down her spine. "He dares!" she repeated, her voice restrained but seething. She stood moving to the window, gazing at the perfectly manicured garden. In her mind, years of carefully laid plans, positioning Tom and Annabelle, expanding her network, were now teetering. She had believed Charles's loyalty would shield her. But William wasn't Charles. He acted independently, uncompromisingly, and for the first time Camilla felt a spark of fear. In the drawing room at Clarence's house, the flickering firelight cast shadows across Camilla's face, highlighting the fine lines at her eyes, marks of years navigating court storms. She sat motionless on a velvet chair, clutching a glass of wine, her gaze lost in the void. News of William's audit had swept through the palace, and within days its power was evident. Several individuals, partners of Tom and Annabelle, players in her semi-transparent projects, had been summoned for questioning. No one was directly accused, but the way William's team zeroed in on them, like warning shots before the main assault, made it clear to Camilla this was a message meant for her. Camilla tightened her grip on the glass, the confidence she'd felt after Charles's defense now replaced by a gnawing unease. "He's playing a game," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling slightly. William wasn't just launching an audit, he was signaling he knew everything and wouldn't stop. The individuals under scrutiny, a contractor in Wiltshire, a media consultant tied to Tom, were minor links in her web. By targeting them first, rather than naming her outright, William made her feel like prey being toyed with before the final strike. She set the glass down, stood and paced to the window, staring into the darkened garden. A storm of emotion swirled within her: anger at being challenged, fear of William's resolve, and a tinge of regret for underestimating him. Camilla prided herself on her cunning, her ability to navigate court politics. But William wasn't like Charles. He wasn't swayed by sentiment or sweet words. She knew that if this escalated, the audit would soon reach her, and the world would know. "I have to act first," Camilla decided, her eyes flashing with resolve. She needed to face William to gauge his intentions and find a way to stop this storm. She summoned her aide, her voice icy but betraying tension. "Arrange a private meeting with Prince William, here at Clarence's house, as soon as possible." The small room at Clarence's house where the meeting took place was oppressively still. The dim light of an antique chandelier illuminated the patterned walls, casting shadows that seemed to dance. Camilla sat on a red velvet chair, her hands clasped tightly, her face tense, but maintaining a practiced calm. Across from her, William stood tall, his blue eyes cold as ice, unwavering. The air between them was thick, as if every word about to be spoken could shatter the palace. Camilla spoke first, her voice soft, but with a tremble she couldn't fully hide. "William, this doesn't need to escalate," she said, her eyes searching for a crack in his resolve. "Don't tear our family apart. We can settle this discreetly." William locked eyes with her, unblinking. He had prepared for this moment, anticipating her deft words. But she wasn't facing Charles, easily swayed by affection. She faced him, the heir to the throne, determined to protect the royal legacy at all costs. "You had your chance to keep this within the family," he said, his voice even, but sharp as a blade. "But you chose to exploit your position, building a network to place your kin where they don't belong. Did you think I'd let it slide?" Camilla's lips tightened, her eyes flashing with anger and bitterness. She had built this network over years, with calculated steps and patient alliances to secure her family's place in the court. Each contract, project, and expense was carefully orchestrated to bolster Tom and Annabelle's influence. But now, facing William, she sensed an impenetrable wall, a foe she couldn't easily outmaneuver. She took a deep breath, trying to regain composure. "William, you're misunderstanding," she said, her tone softening, as if soothing a child. "I only wanted to help the monarchy, to help Charles. Tom and Annabelle are experienced, loyal. What I've done is for the greater good." William didn't respond immediately. He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving her face. The greater good, he echoed, his voice low and laced with irony. You call funneling royal funds through shell companies the greater good, using estates for personal gain loyalty. I've seen the reports, Camilla. I know everything, and I won't let it continue. Camilla's heart raced. She had underestimated William, thinking the audit was a bluff, that he wouldn't dare go too far for fear of hurting Charles. But the scrutiny of her allies, those warning shots, showed he was deadly serious and strategic. She searched for an escape, a way to negotiate, but his eyes offered no mercy. What do you want? She asked, her voice dropping to a near whisper. To destroy me. To destroy Charles. William tilted his head, his gaze cold as stone. I don't want to destroy anyone. He said, his voice calm but commanding. But I will protect the throne. You have two choices. One, you pull your people out of the system. Tom, Annabelle, all contracts, all resources, and return everything to the crown. Do that and I'll stop. Two, I make everything public and let the public judge a queen who abuses her power. The choice is yours. William's words rang like a verdict, each syllable measured and cutting. Camilla fell silent, her eyes burning with anger and resentment. She wanted to fight back, to argue, but deep down she knew she was cornered. William wasn't Charles. He wasn't swayed by emotion or charm. He was the heir, and he had proven he'd act to protect the royal legacy. After a long silence, Camilla stood, her regal bearing intact, but her eyes lacking their former confidence. You'll regret pushing this so far, she said, her voice low but defiant. The court isn't a place for the inflexible like you. William didn't reply. He simply watched her, his gaze steady, as if saying no threat could make him falter. Camilla turned and left the room, her heels clicking on the wooden floor, leaving behind a heavy silence. In the weeks following the tense confrontation at Clarence House, the court fell into an eerie calm, like the stillness before a great storm. Camilla, though, reluctantly acted swiftly to extinguish the fire William had ignited. Tom Parker Bowles withdrew from all royal projects, from media events to consulting contracts. Annabelle Elliott, under the guise of an extended leave, quietly stepped away from managing estates. Contracts linked to their shell companies, the intricate links of Camilla's web, were canceled, and resources misused for personal gain were returned to the royal treasury. It all happened in silence, without public explanation, but the entire palace knew this was the result of William's ultimatum. At Clarence House, Camilla sat in the drawing room, the firelight casting shadows across her face, now stripped of its former confidence. She held a glass of wine but didn't drink, staring into the deep red liquid as if it held answers to what she'd lost. She knew retreat was her only option. William held undeniable evidence, and defiance would mean public judgment too harsh even for a queen to endure. But within her, a flame of anger still smoldered. He thinks he's won, she thought, but the court is a long game. I'll return. In his private office at Kensington Palace, William sat alone, the pale golden light of the afternoon streaming through the window, bathing his walnut desk in a soft glow. Before him was a cold cup of tea, which he turned gently in his hands, reflecting on what had transpired. James entered, holding a thin stack of papers, his voice respectful but tinged with admiration. Sir, it's done, he reported. She's pulled out completely. Tom's gone from the events, Annabelle's left the estates, and their contracts are terminated. William nodded, his gaze fixed on the garden outside where leaves rustled in the autumn breeze. He didn't respond immediately, letting the silence linger, as if weighing the meaning of this victory. He had achieved what he wanted. Camilla's network was dismantled, at least on the surface. But there was no triumph in his heart, only a quiet resolve. He thought of his father Charles, likely grappling with the reality of his wife's overreach. He thought of Camilla, once an integral part of their family, now forced to retreat before him. I didn't want to hurt father, he thought, but I couldn't let her continue. William set the teacup down, a faint smile crossing his lips, not of victory, but of satisfaction in doing what was right. He had acted not for himself, but for the throne's honor, for the legacy he'd pass to his children. The audit, the ultimatum, his cold silence during the confrontation with Camilla, all were calculated moves to send a message he was the heir, and he would not tolerate threats to the monarchy. William stood and walked to the window. The fading golden light of dusk illuminated his face, highlighting his resolute features. He knew this battle wasn't truly over. Camilla might have retreated, but she was a seasoned player unlikely to abandon her ambitions. Yet William wasn't afraid. He had proven he could protect the throne without a crown, without a coronation. In the waning light, he stood alone, but the entire palace knew a true king had begun to reign. Like, share and subscribe to dive deeper into these gripping tales of royal intrigue and never miss a twist in the saga.